The coffee cup slipped, not by accident but with intention, and hot liquid splashed across the apron of the woman who had raised him like her own. The millionaire's wife smirked, her words dripping with mock concern. "Oh, Ruth, you should be more careful." But what she didn't expect was the storm her cruelty would awaken, a storm that would shake the entire family and force Nathaniel to finally choose between silence and the woman who had given him everything. But before we dive into the full story, let me know, where are you watching from and what time is it? If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and comment on the story you're watching. Your support helps us bring you even more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. I never thought I'd see Fairmont Hills again. The very name carried weight in my chest, like a secret too heavy to say out loud. As the black Mercedes wound its way down the long, twisting country road, I could already see the treetops swaying in the distance, their leaves shimmering gold and green in the late afternoon light. It had been over a decade since I left this place. 10 years of forging my own path in San Francisco's ruthless tech world. 10 years of building, breaking, and rebuilding until I had something no one could ignore: wealth, status, recognition, everything I thought I needed to finally be taken seriously, even by the ghosts of my past. But as the stone pillars of the estate gates rose into view, I felt none of that confidence. Instead, a storm gathered inside me, part dread, part nostalgia, part something I couldn't yet name. Beside me sat Vanessa, my new wife. Perfectly composed, her posture straight as a blade, her manicured nails tracing absent-minded circles on the leather armrest. Her perfume filled the car, expensive, sharp, deliberate, like everything about her. She turned her head toward me, her dark hair catching the light. "You're awfully quiet," she said, her voice calm but curious. I forced a small smile, though my throat felt tight. "Just thinking, it's been a long time." "Too long, maybe," she replied, tilting her chin up. "Your family will be thrilled. And honestly, Nathaniel, they should be. You've made something of yourself. You've built an empire. Don't look so nervous." She said it with such certainty, like returning here was no different from walking into one of our company boardrooms. But this wasn't business. This was home, or at least it had been. The car slowed as the wrought iron gates creaked open, revealing the sweeping driveway lined with ancient oaks, their branches arched overhead like guardians, or maybe judges, watching as I came back to face everything I had left behind. I leaned back in my seat and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You don't know this place, Vanessa. It's complicated." She laughed softly, brushing invisible dust off her dress. "Everything's complicated until you take control of it. Trust me, I know how to win people over." Her confidence was admirable. It was one of the reasons I'd married her. But as the estate appeared over the hill, its stone facade bathed in the golden glow of sunset, I knew this wasn't going to be so simple. Fairmont Hills wasn't just a house. It was a living thing with long memory and unforgiving rules. The car came to a halt near the front steps. For a moment, I didn't move. I stared at the grand entryway, at the ivy climbing up the columns, at the windows glinting like eyes. 1,000 memories stirred, running barefoot across the lawns, hiding in the library stacks, hearing bedtime stories whispered by a voice that wasn't my mother's. "Nathaniel." Vanessa's voice broke through my thoughts. She tilted her head. "You look pale. Are you all right?" I cleared my throat. "Yeah, just a lot to take in." The doors creaked open with a weight that seemed older than me, older than all of us. For a heartbeat, the foyer stood silent, its polished marble floors gleaming under the chandelier's glow. Then came the footsteps. Familiar voices filled the hall, a chorus I hadn't heard in years. Nathaniel, my sister's sharp voice rang first. Caroline always knew how to cut through silence like a blade. She descended the staircase with her usual precision, every strand of her chestnut hair perfectly in place. Her heels tapped against the floor as if they were keeping score of everything I owed her. "Well, well," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The prodigal brother returns. Took you long enough." I forced a laugh, stepping forward to greet her. "Nice to see you too, Caroline." She leaned in, brushing my cheek in the briefest imitation of a hug. "I was starting to think you forgot where you came from." Her gaze flickered toward Vanessa, who stood poised at my side. "And you brought a guest." "My wife," I said quickly. "Vanessa, this is my sister, Caroline." Caroline's eyebrow arched, the corner of her lips tugging in amusement. "Wife, congratulations. I had no idea you were even seeing someone serious. You always did like surprises." Vanessa extended her hand gracefully. "Caroline, I've heard much about you." Caroline took her hand with the faintest squeeze, her eyes glinting. "I doubt that." Before the tension could deepen, another voice boomed from across the hall. Ethan, my cousin, strolled in with a grin wide enough to hide a dagger behind it. He had always been like that, charming to strangers, dangerous to those who knew better. "Nathaniel Reed," he exclaimed, pulling me into a quick, forceful embrace. "The boy who thought he could outrun Fairmont. Guess what? It caught up with you." "Good to see you, Ethan," I said, patting his back warily. His cologne was strong, overpowering, a reminder of his need to dominate every room. He leaned back, eyes sliding toward Vanessa. "And this must be the lovely Mrs. Reed. Vanessa, is it? You poor thing, marrying into this madhouse." Vanessa chuckled lightly, though her grip on my arm tightened. "I can handle a madhouse," she replied smoothly. Ethan winked. "I'll hold you to that." But even as they swirled around us, Caroline with her pointed barbs, Ethan with his sly games, I found my eyes searching past them. I was looking for her, and then I saw her. Ruth Ellis stood just beyond the group, near the edge of the hall, as if she didn't belong at the center of it all. She hadn't changed in spirit, though time had etched its lines across her dark skin and silver streaks through her once black hair. Her uniform was simple, neat, pressed to perfection, but it was her eyes that undid me, still warm, still steady, still the same eyes that had looked down at me when I was a boy too afraid to sleep alone. "Ruth," I whispered before I could stop myself. Her face lit up with a smile that wasn't polite or forced. It was real, unguarded, full of love. "My boy," she said softly. Her voice was lower now, gentler, but still carried that familiar strength. In that moment, years collapsed. I closed the distance and wrapped my arms around her. For a second, I wasn't the CEO who built a tech empire or the husband trying to impress his wife. I was just Nathaniel, the child who had scraped his knees in the garden and found comfort in her lap, who had cried into her apron when my parents were too busy to notice. She patted my back the same way she used to, slow and steady. "You came home," she said, almost in disbelief. I pulled back, blinking faster than I should have. "I told you I would, I just took the long way around." Caroline crossed her arms, her smirk sharp. "Well, isn't this touching? Our dear Nathaniel hugging the help before anyone else." Vanessa tilted her head, her smile still intact but her eyes narrowing in calculation. "And you are." Ruth straightened, clasping her hands before her. "Ruth Ellis, ma'am. I've been with the Reed family for many years." Vanessa's lips curved politely, but I could see the flicker of confusion, the quick judgment behind her gaze. "Of course," she said. "Pleasure." The handshake that followed was brief, cold. I saw Ruth's expression shift just slightly before smoothing again into composure. Ethan chuckled, clapping his hands once. "Well, Nathaniel, seems like you still remember where the real loyalty lies. Don't let your wife get jealous." "Ethan," I warned, my voice low. He just grinned wider. "What? I'm only saying what everyone's thinking." Caroline rolled her eyes. "Ignore him. He lives for stirring trouble." Vanessa, however, said nothing. She simply smiled, that practiced smile of hers, and slipped her arm tighter through mine. But I felt it, the weight of her silence, the chill of her unspoken thoughts. And in that silence, I understood something dangerous. Bringing Ruth back into my life openly might cost me more than I'd anticipated. Later that evening, when the greetings had faded and the others drifted into smaller conversations, I slipped outside to the veranda. The night air was cool, the stars scattered across the velvet sky. I pulled my phone from my pocket, hesitating before dialing. "Mark," I said when my old friend answered. "Nathaniel, damn, it's been months, what's going on?" I hesitated, staring back at the glow of the estate windows. "I'm home at Fairmont with Vanessa." Mark whistled low. "So you finally did it, and I muttered, rubbing my forehead. I saw Ruth again. There was a pause. "The woman who practically raised you." "Nathaniel, don't tell me." "It's complicated," I cut in quickly. "It always was," Mark replied. "But listen to me. If Vanessa doesn't understand who Ruth is to you, then she doesn't understand you at all." His words landed heavier than I wanted to admit. "I'll figure it out," I said, though doubt clawed at me. "You'd better," Mark said, "because some debts can't be repaid with money, only with loyalty." I ended the call and stood there, staring out at the gardens where I used to run as a child. The wind rustled the trees, carrying faint echoes of laughter long gone. Inside, I could still hear Vanessa's voice mingling with Caroline's, smooth and polite, already weaving herself into the fabric of the family. But my heart was still caught in Ruth's eyes, the eyes that had reminded me who I truly was. And as much as I wanted to believe I could balance it all, I already knew the truth. Welcoming Ruth openly into my life again would come at a cost. A cost I wasn't sure Vanessa, or the family, would ever be willing to pay. Before stepping out, I pulled my phone from my pocket. There was a missed call from an old college friend, Mark Reynolds, a reminder that my world outside these gates still existed. Mark had always been the one to ground me, the one who never cared about wealth or appearances. He told me once, "You can outrun your hometown, but not what it made you." I hadn't believed him then. Now, staring at Fairmont Hills, I wondered if he'd been right. I shoved the phone away. "Not now." The driver opened Vanessa's door first. She stepped out with the grace of someone who had walked red carpets and spoken at charity galas. Her heels clicked against the stone pavement like a gavel striking judgment. I followed, smoothing my jacket as if that would steady my nerves. The air smelled faintly of pine and cut grass, so familiar it made my chest ache. Vanessa glanced at the towering estate, her lips curving ever so slightly. "It's beautiful," she said, though her tone was lukewarm, as if she had expected something grander, newer, shinier. I swallowed hard. "It's old, it carries history." She slipped her arm through mine, squeezing lightly. "Then it's time for a new chapter, ours." Her words were meant to reassure, but instead they deepened the unease clawing at me, because this wasn't just about us. It was about her, the woman who raised me, who had been more of a mother to me than the one who bore me. And if Vanessa was already measuring the estate against her standards, I feared what she would do once she measured Ruth. As we began walking toward the grand steps, I caught sight of Mr. Dempsey, the old gardener, still tending the roses near the fountain. His back was bent, but his movements were steady, deliberate. He looked up and squinted, then broke into a slow grin. "Nathaniel Reed." His voice was roughened with age but laced with warmth. He set down his shears and wiped his hands on his trousers before approaching. I smiled genuinely for the first time since we'd arrived. "Mr. Dempsey, you're still here." "Of course I am," he chuckled, shaking my hand firmly. "Fairmont doesn't let go of its people so easily. My God, you've grown and you brought company. This is my wife, Vanessa." Vanessa offered her hand, her smile polished but restrained. "Pleasure," she said. Dempsey nodded politely, though his eyes flicked between us with a knowing glint. "Welcome back, both of you. The house has been waiting." The way he said it sent a chill through me. Waiting. As if the walls themselves had been holding their breath for my return. Inside, the grand doors loomed ahead, heavy oak carved with symbols of my family's crest. Vanessa's grip on my arm tightened slightly, as though she could already sense that the air beyond those doors would not bend easily to her will. I inhaled deeply, steeling myself. The boy who left Fairmont Hills years ago was gone, but whether the man I had become was strong enough to face what waited inside, that was a question I wasn't ready to answer. The first morning at Fairmont Hills should have felt like homecoming. Instead, it felt like walking into an art gallery where every piece had already been judged and dismissed. Vanessa's heels clicked against the polished floors as she wandered from room to room, her gaze sharp, calculating. Her fingers trailed across the wallpaper in the east corridor, tracing the faded damask pattern. "This," she said, her tone casual but carrying that familiar undertone of critique. "It must have been lovely 30 years ago. Honestly, Nathaniel, don't you think the place could use a proper update?" I followed a few steps behind, my hands in my pockets. "It has history, Vanessa. Every piece tells a story." She turned her head, her expression softening into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Darling, dust tells a story too, but no one brags about it." Before I could answer, Caroline appeared at the end of the hallway, arms crossed. "You know," she said with a sly grin, "people come here for tradition, not to watch someone gut it like a condo in Silicon Valley." Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she didn't falter. "Tradition is lovely, Caroline, but clinging to it too tightly is just another word for stagnation." Caroline smirked as though she had just won a private argument. "Good luck convincing this house of that. It's older and more stubborn than any of us." By evening, the house hummed with the low murmur of preparation for dinner. The long mahogany table gleamed under candlelight, the silverware arranged with military precision. The family gathered in their usual places, each of us part of a play we had performed countless times before. Ruth moved with her characteristic grace, checking the settings, ensuring everything was in place. When she finally sat down, it was in the chair she had always occupied, quietly at the far end but still at the table. Vanessa's eyes lingered there, curiosity masked as a smile. She swirled her wine glass before speaking, her tone light but deliberate. "I couldn't help but notice," she said, "that Ruth dines with us." The room stilled. Caroline's fork clinked softly against her plate. Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirk spreading across his face like a shadow. Aunt Margaret, seated at the head, arched a brow but said nothing. "Yes," I said quickly, forcing a smile, trying to smooth the edges of what I already knew was becoming a blade. "Ruth has always joined us. It's tradition here." Vanessa tilted her head, her voice honeyed but cool. Interesting. In most homes, staff usually, she paused, choosing her words carefully, keep a respectful distance. My chest tightened. Before I could respond, Ruth lifted her gaze, her voice calm and steady. I've been with the Reed family for many years, ma'am. This has always been our way. It wasn't defiance. It was dignity laced with quiet steel. And somehow it sliced sharper than any raised voice could have. Vanessa smiled politely and raised her glass. Every family has its customs. I suppose I'll get used to this one. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, the calculation, the judgment, the unspoken disapproval. After dinner, when the others drifted off into smaller conversations, Ethan cornered me near the fireplace. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his grin mischievous. Well, that was entertaining, he said. Your wife versus your second mother didn't take long, did it? I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. She's just adjusting. Ethan chuckled darkly. Adjusting or plotting, you'd better figure that out, cousin. Because one of these women knows how to fight without ever raising her voice. And spoiler, it's not your wife. He raised his glass in a mock toast before sauntering off, leaving his words to echo like a dare. That night I found Vanessa by the window of our room, her silhouette bathed in moonlight. She didn't turn when I entered, just spoke softly, her reflection sharp in the glass. This house could be ours, she whispered. I set my watch on the dresser, my voice careful. It is ours, we live here now. She turned then, her eyes glinting. No, Nathaniel, not like that. This house could be ours, truly ours, if you stop clinging to the past. These traditions, these attachments, they make you weak. Her words hit me harder than I expected. You're talking about Ruth. Vanessa stepped closer, resting her hand on my chest. I'm talking about all of it. The wallpaper, the chandeliers, the rituals, the people. You're a man who built an empire in the real world. Don't let this place drag you backward. Her touch was warm, but her words were cold. They felt less like advice and more like a threat, carefully wrapped in silk. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile to cover the unease in my chest. We'll see, I said. She leaned in, kissing me softly, her whisper brushing my ear. No, Nathaniel, you'll see. Sleep didn't come easily. Long after Vanessa had drifted off, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of Fairmont Hills. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the battle lines had already been drawn. And the woman lying next to me wasn't just my wife. She was becoming my rival. The first full week at Fairmont Hills was a lesson in tension. The kind that doesn't explode outright but lingers like a storm cloud, always threatening rain. Vanessa was at the center of it. She had a gift for making comments that looked like compliments if you only heard the first few words, but cut like glass by the time she finished the sentence. At breakfast one morning, she smiled at Ruth, who was pouring coffee into my Aunt Margaret's cup. Ruth, she said sweetly, you have such a steady hand. I can't imagine working in a uniform like that every day. Don't you ever wish for something more flattering? The table went silent for a moment, everyone waiting to see how Ruth would react. Ruth simply inclined her head. I'm comfortable, ma'am, that's all that matters. Her voice was calm, her expression serene, but I caught it, the faint tightening at the corner of her jaw, a private signal of the insult landing harder than she let on. Caroline smirked from across the table, sipping her tea. Oh, don't mind Vanessa, she said lightly. She's always had strong opinions about other people's choices. Ethan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Strong opinions, try artillery fire. Ethan, I muttered, shooting him a warning glance. He shrugged, his grin widening. Hey, don't look at me. I'm just enjoying the show. That became the pattern. Vanessa's remarks were small but relentless. About Ruth's uniform, her role in family matters, even the way she decorated her modest quarters near the servants' wing. One afternoon, I overheard Vanessa speaking to Caroline in the sitting room, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch. "I don't understand why she's so involved," Vanessa said. "She's in every conversation, every decision. It's like she's more family than staff." Caroline, never one to waste an opportunity to stir the pot, leaned back against the couch and smirked. "Maybe she is. Nathaniel certainly thinks so." I felt my stomach twist at Caroline's words. It wasn't just a jab at Ruth, it was a warning shot aimed at me. Later that day, I found Ruth in the library dusting the shelves. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating the quiet dignity in her posture. "You've been quiet," I said gently, stepping inside. She glanced at me, her hands still moving along the shelves. "I've learned that sometimes silence keeps the peace." "That's not fair," I said. "You shouldn't have to put up with." She turned, her eyes steady, calm. "Nathaniel, I've weathered storms before. This one is no different." But it was different. I could see it in her eyes, in the weariness behind her smile. She wasn't afraid of Vanessa. She was tired of battles that never seemed to end. And for the first time, I wondered what it meant for me to let her fight this one alone. That evening, Ethan cornered me outside near the stables, cigarette in hand. The air smelled of smoke and hay. "You know she's testing you, right?" he said, exhaling a stream of smoke. "Vanessa?" I asked. "Who else?" He grinned, tapping ash onto the gravel. "She's poking Ruth to see how much you'll tolerate, to see where your loyalty lies. Clever, really." I shook my head. "It's cruel." Ethan chuckled. "Cruelty is just honesty without makeup. You married a strategist, cousin. Now you have to decide, are you playing her game or Ruth's?" I clenched my fists, frustrated. "This isn't a game." Ethan gave me a pitying look. "Everything's a game in this family, you just haven't figured out the rules yet." That night, Vanessa slipped into bed beside me. The sheets were cool, the room dark except for the moonlight spilling across the floor. She rested her head on my shoulder, her voice soft, intimate. "You've been so tense lately," she whispered. I swallowed hard. "I just don't like the way you speak to Ruth." Her head lifted, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Nathaniel, she's a servant. Why are you so protective of her?" "She's more than that," I said firmly. "She raised me." Vanessa's lips curved in a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "And that's the problem, you're still clinging to the past. This house could be ours, Nathaniel, truly ours, but only if you stop letting these old attachments drag you backward." Her words weren't advice. They were a line drawn in the sand. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew she was right about one thing. I did cling to the past. And maybe the only thing standing between me and the future she wanted was Ruth. But I also knew this. Letting go of Ruth wasn't an option. Not for me. As Vanessa drifted off to sleep, I lay awake in the darkness, the echo of Ethan's warning replaying in my head. "She's testing you. Sooner or later, she'll force you to choose." And the terrifying truth was, I didn't know which choice would destroy me more. The sun spilled into the dining room that morning, painting the long table in warm light. Aunt Margaret had insisted on a family brunch, the kind meant to remind everyone that Fairmont Hills was not just a house but a dynasty. The silver gleamed, the china sparkled, and the air was thick with expectation. I took my place near the middle, Vanessa seated elegantly beside me. Caroline lounged 2 chairs down, her eyes already scanning the room for weaknesses. Ethan, late as usual, breezed in with a grin. dropping into his seat like he owned the place. And at the far end, moving quietly as always, was Ruth. She placed a tray of fresh biscuits in front of Margaret, her apron crisp, her hair pinned neatly back. To me, she was the anchor of the morning, the one presence that made the meal feel whole. And then it happened. Vanessa lifted her cup of coffee, her wrist tilting just slightly too far. The liquid arced forward, splashing down across Ruth's apron in a dark, scalding stain. The sound of the porcelain cup clinking back onto the saucer echoed louder than it should have. "Oh," Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Ruth, you should be more careful." The room froze. Ruth looked down at the spreading stain, then up at Vanessa, her face calm, her voice steady. "It's quite all right, ma'am. Accidents happen." But we all knew it hadn't been an accident. My fists clenched beneath the table. Words pressed against my throat, desperate to escape. Say something. Defend her. But I didn't. My jaw locked, and silence filled the space where my voice should have been. Caroline raised her brow, biting back a smirk as though she'd just witnessed the opening scene of a play she couldn't wait to see unravel. Ethan leaned back in his chair, swirling his orange juice, his grin slow and knowing. Aunt Margaret's eyes, sharp as glass, flickered to me before narrowing on Vanessa. "Ruth," Margaret said gently, "go change before it sets." Ruth nodded, excusing herself with her usual dignity, moving toward the kitchen without a single glance back. Vanessa folded her napkin neatly, her expression one of feigned innocence. "Really, I didn't mean to." My hand slipped. No one responded. The silence was heavy, suffocating. And in that silence, I betrayed Ruth. After brunch, I stepped out onto the terrace for air. The garden stretched wide before me, every hedge trimmed, every fountain whispering softly. But I couldn't shake the image of Ruth's apron, soaked with coffee, and the way she had walked away without defense, because she trusted me to do it for her. I hadn't. "Nathaniel," I turned. Aunt Margaret stood behind me, her posture regal, her cane tapping lightly against the stone floor. She was in her 70s, but her presence was as commanding as ever. "You've grown into a man," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. I tried to smile. "That's generous of you." Her eyes narrowed. "But silence is still the coward's refuge." The words sliced through me. I opened my mouth, then shut it. She was right. My silence hadn't preserved peace, it had surrendered honor. Margaret stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Ruth has carried this family longer than any of us have. If you let your wife tear her down without resistance, you are not protecting peace, you are feeding betrayal." I swallowed hard. "It's not that simple." "It's always simple," Margaret replied. "It's choosing what matters most. And you," her eyes bore into me, "you know exactly what matters, you're just afraid to say it." With that, she turned and walked back inside, leaving me with her words echoing in my chest like a bell tolling judgment. Later in the stables, I found Ethan leaning against a stall, tossing grain absent-mindedly to a horse that wasn't his. "Well," he drawled, "that was entertaining. I thought you were going to leap across the table, but then nothing. You sat there like a statue." "Shut up, Ethan," I muttered. He laughed, low and amused. "Don't be mad at me. I'm just pointing out the obvious. You've got a wife with teeth and a nanny who raised you like her own, and you're stuck in the middle with your mouth shut. That never ends well." I glared at him. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," he said, flicking grain off his fingers. "One day soon, cousin, you'll have to pick a side. And when you do, you'll lose the other one. That's not a guess, that's a promise." That evening, Ruth reappeared, her apron freshly laundered, her hair smoothed, her face composed. If she carried hurt, she buried it deep. I tried to meet her eyes, but she only offered me a small, tired smile as though to say, "It's all right, Nathaniel." I'll survive this too. But for the first time, I realized survival wasn't enough. And as I lay awake that night, Vanessa asleep beside me, Margaret's words burned through me. Silence is still the coward's refuge. I was at a crossroads now. Defend the woman who had raised me, who had been my true family when no one else was, or continue protecting the fragile peace of my marriage. Either way, the storm was coming, and I wasn't sure if Fairmont Hills or I would survive it. The night of the charity gala came with more weight than I had expected. Fairmont Hills hadn't hosted an event this grand in years. Aunt Margaret had insisted we reopen the doors, claiming the family needed to remind the town what legacy looks like. By dusk, the estate was alive. Cars swept up the long drive, headlights flashing against the oaks. Guests in gowns and tailored suits spilled into the grand ballroom, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Chandeliers glittered above like captured constellations. Vanessa was in her element. She glided through the crowd in a gown the color of midnight, her diamond earrings catching every flash of light. People leaned in as she spoke, charmed by her wit, dazzled by her composure. To them she was the perfect hostess, the new mistress of Fairmont Hills. I stayed near the bar nursing a drink, watching her work the room like it was her stage. Every smile she offered, every hand she touched was rehearsed perfection. But beneath her polish, I sensed the sharpened edge of ambition. Halfway through the evening, Ruth passed by carrying a tray of champagne flutes. She moved quietly, blending into the background as she always had, her uniform immaculate, her steps steady. Vanessa's laughter cut through the hum of conversation. She turned toward a group of guests, bankers, lawyers, people she wanted on her side, and said lightly, "Can you believe it? This house still holds on to its relics. Some things it just can't seem to part with." Her eyes flicked to Ruth. A few guests chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to follow Vanessa's lead or avert their eyes. Ruth didn't stop walking. She didn't stumble, didn't spill a glass. She simply kept moving, her face calm. But I saw it, the flicker in her eyes, a glimmer of hurt she tried to bury, and it made something inside me fracture. Later, after the last car had disappeared down the drive and the ballroom lights were dimmed, I wandered through the quiet halls. My steps carried me to the garden, drawn by a feeling I couldn't shake. There she was. Ruth sat on a stone bench near the roses, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze lifted to the stars. The soft glow from the lanterns touched the silver in her hair, making her look both weary and timeless. I approached slowly. "You don't have to stay," I said quietly. She looked at me then, her eyes steady, filled with a sadness I had never seen before. A small smile curved her lips, but it wasn't joy, it was resignation. "You don't understand, Nathaniel," she said softly. "This house isn't mine, it never was, I've only ever borrowed its corners." Her words pierced me deeper than any insult Vanessa could deliver. "You built this place as much as anyone," I insisted, my voice breaking more than I wanted it to. "You raised me here, you kept it alive when no one else cared." Ruth shook her head gently. "I was a caretaker, a guardian for a time. But houses, like people, eventually choose who belongs. And lately," she trailed off, her eyes drifting back toward the ballroom windows, "I'm not sure it's me anymore." I sat beside her, the scent of roses heavy in the air. "Without you, it's just stone and wood," I said. "You gave it a soul." She chuckled softly, though there was no humor in it. "Souls don't live in buildings, Nathaniel. They live in people. And you," she touched my hand lightly, "you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. Because silence," she let the word linger, "it changes people, it changes houses too." Her hand withdrew, folding back into her lap. I stared at her, at the woman who had given me more love than my own parents ever had, and felt the walls closing in. She was slipping away, not with anger or defiance, but with quiet surrender, and that terrified me more than anything. Before I could answer, a voice carried from the terrace. "Nathaniel." Vanessa. Her silhouette appeared against the glow of the French doors, her gown still perfect, her posture regal. "There you are," she said smoothly. "I was wondering where you'd gone. Our guests kept asking for you." Ruth rose slowly, smoothing her apron. "I should return to my duties," she murmured. "Ruth," I started, but she shook her head, giving me that same tired, gentle smile. "Good night, Nathaniel." She walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the garden, her steps steady but heavy. Vanessa descended the steps, her heels sharp against the stone. She slipped her arm through mine, leaning in as though nothing were wrong. "Why do you look so serious?" she asked sweetly. I forced a smile, though my chest felt like it was splitting. "Just thinking," I said. She tilted her head, her voice dropping lower. "Don't think too hard, darling. This house is ours now. We should enjoy it." Her words felt like another crack running through the foundation of Fairmont Hills, and I couldn't help but wonder how long before the whole place, or the people inside it, shattered completely. The days after the gala dragged like a sentence. The air in Fairmont Hills felt heavier, as though the house itself had absorbed every awkward laugh, every cruel remark, every unspoken word from that night. Ruth avoided me. Not in an obvious way. She was still there in the mornings, preparing the dining room, still steady in the evenings, moving quietly through the halls. But she no longer met my eyes. No more small smiles when our paths crossed. No quiet questions about whether I was sleeping well. Just polite acknowledgments, her dignity intact, her warmth locked away. It was worse than anger. Anger you can fight. Silence you can drown in. Vanessa, meanwhile, grew bolder. Over breakfast one morning, she spread blueprints across the table as though she were unveiling a battle plan. "These staff quarters," she said, tapping her manicured nail against the paper, "are absurd. They take up valuable space. We could expand the guest wing, maybe add a gym or spa, something modern, something useful." Across the table, Caroline scoffed, setting down her teacup with a sharp click. "Useful to whom exactly? The only thing a spa would do here is feed your vanity." Vanessa's smile never faltered. "Legacy should evolve, Caroline, otherwise it rots." Ethan leaned forward, his grin sly, his eyes flicking between them. "She's got a point. Do you have any idea how much money we'd save shutting down those old quarters? Heating, maintenance, staffing, hell, we could cut the overhead in half." "Of course you'd be interested in cutting costs," Caroline muttered, rolling her eyes. "You've been sniffing around this estate's accounts for years." Ethan shrugged, unbothered. "Business is business. Even family legacy has a bottom line." Vanessa turned to me, her gaze sharp, calculating. "Don't you agree, Nathaniel? Shouldn't we look forward instead of backward?" Every eye at the table shifted toward me. My throat tightened. Words rose but died before reaching my lips. I forced a neutral smile. "It's something to consider." Vanessa's smile widened, victory in her eyes. Caroline leaned back, disgust curling her mouth. "You're letting her win," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. The words stung because they were true, and because her could mean Vanessa or my fear. That evening, I wandered into the library, desperate for solitude. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that slanted through the high windows. Books I hadn't touched since childhood lined the shelves, their spines worn, their secrets preserved. I pulled down one at random, an old copy of Treasure Island. The leather binding cracked in my hands. A memory surfaced, me at 8 years old, curled in this very corner with Ruth beside me, reading aloud because my father never had the time. I closed my eyes and the memory deepened. In the dream that followed, I was no longer the man sitting in a library. I was that boy again, barefoot in the garden, knees scraped raw from falling on the stone path. I remembered sobbing, hot tears blurring my vision when Ruth had crouched beside me, her hands steady, her voice soft. "Kindness is strength, Nathaniel," she whispered, dabbing gently at the blood with her handkerchief. "Never let anyone convince you otherwise. The strongest men I've known are the ones who choose to protect instead of harm." Her words wrapped around me like a shield back then. But now in the dream they cut through me like a blade, because I wasn't protecting. I was silent, and silence was killing her slowly, one insult, one humiliation at a time. I woke in the middle of the night, sweat cooling on my skin, the echo of her words pounding in my head. Silence is the knife I've been holding to her throat all along. I sat up, staring at the shadows crawling along the bedroom walls. Beside me, Vanessa slept soundly, her breathing even, her beauty flawless even in the dark. But all I could see was Ruth's face at the gala, the way her eyes dimmed even though she never faltered in her step. I buried my head in my hands, guilt pressing down like a weight I couldn't lift. I knew what needed to be done, but knowing and doing, those were two different battles, and sooner or later I would run out of time to choose. I had been avoiding this hallway for days, the narrow corridor that led to the servants' quarters. The air there always carried a faint lavender scent, Ruth's signature. Tonight, though, it felt different, heavier, like the air was holding its breath. I paused at her door, hand hovering before I finally knocked. It opened slowly, and there she stood. Ruth's uniform was gone, replaced by a simple traveling coat. At her feet sat a small, worn suitcase. Her silver-streaked hair was neatly pinned back, her face calm, composed. But it wasn't serenity, it was finality. "You're leaving." I choked, my throat tight. Her eyes softened, but her voice was steady. "I've survived worse, Nathaniel, but being humiliated under your silence hurts more than hunger ever did." The words hit me harder than a fist. "Ruth, please," I said quickly, stepping inside. My chest ached as I took in the sight of her room, stripped of its usual warmth. The quilts she'd kept folded on the chair were gone. The framed photograph of me as a boy, knees scraped, grinning wide with her arm around me, was missing from the bedside table. It was like she had already erased herself from Fairmont Hills. "I didn't mean to," I began. Her brow lifted, stopping me cold. "Didn't mean to what? Stay quiet, watch while I was made small. Nathaniel, silence is a choice, and you chose it." I swallowed hard. I thought I was keeping the peace. "Peace," she said, her voice trembling just slightly now. "Peace built on someone else's humiliation isn't peace, it's cowardice." Her words carved into me, leaving nothing behind but shame. I sank into the chair by her window, burying my face in my hands. "I can't lose you," I whispered. She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Then prove it," she said gently. "Not with speeches, Nathaniel, with choices, the kind that cost something." My head lifted, desperate. "What do you want me to do?" Her eyes locked with mine, steady as the day she first taught me to stand after falling. "You already know." And then she turned. She lifted the suitcase, her back straight, her movements deliberate. "Ruth, wait," I pleaded, reaching for her arm. "Don't do this. Don't leave me like this." She paused in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim hall light. For a moment I thought she might turn back, Instead, she said softly, I raised you to be a man who speaks when it matters. Don't prove me wrong. Then she walked past me into the night. I stood frozen in the hall long after her footsteps faded. The house around me felt different, hollow. For the first time in years, Fairmont Hills felt colder than stone. The next morning, the absence was undeniable. The kitchen was quieter, the dining room less alive. Even the air felt stripped of something essential. Caroline was the first to speak the truth aloud. So she's gone, she said flatly over her tea. Her eyes flicked to me, unyielding. And you let it happen. I clenched my jaw. You don't understand. Caroline leaned forward, her voice sharp. I understand perfectly. You were too afraid to choose, so the choice was made for you. Before I could answer, Ethan sauntered in, a smirk plastered across his face. Well, looks like the Queen of Fairmont finally quit the game. Can't say I'm surprised. Vanessa's been circling her like a hawk since the moment she arrived. Ethan, I warned, but he raised his hands innocently. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Your wife wanted her gone. Now she is. Congratulations. I slammed my hand against the table, the sound sharp enough to silence even him. Caroline's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Ethan just chuckled, shaking his head as though my anger only proved his point. That night, unable to sleep, I walked the grounds alone. The moonlight lit the gardens where Ruth had once told me bedtime stories under the stars. I could almost hear her voice. Kindness is strength. Silence destroys. But my silence had done more than destroy. It had driven away the one person who had given me everything I never got from my own parents: love, stability, and belonging. And now I had to ask myself a question I wasn't ready for. If I couldn't protect Ruth, who exactly was I protecting? The corridors of Fairmont Hills were silent that night, but not peaceful. The kind of silence that hummed with tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. I climbed the staircase slowly, my hand tightening on the railing. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from something sharper, heavier. Resolve. For days, maybe weeks, I'd been drowning in my own hesitation. Ruth's absence was a wound I had inflicted by standing still. Tonight, the time for silence was over. When I pushed open the bedroom door, Vanessa was standing at the vanity, sliding one diamond earring off her lobe. She caught my reflection in the mirror, her lips curving into a satisfied smile. You finally see what I've been saying, she said, her tone calm, smug, like victory was already hers. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. For the first time in weeks, I stood straighter. My shoulders squared, my voice steady. Pack your things. The earring slipped from her fingers, clattering against the vanity. She turned, her expression sharp with disbelief. Then suddenly she laughed, a cold, cutting sound that echoed against the walls. You'd throw me out, she said incredulously, over her. My jaw tightened. Not over her, I said firmly. Over the man I refused to become. The smile vanished from her lips, her face hardening into something sharper. You'll regret this. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on hers. No, I whispered. I regret waiting this long. And in that moment, for the first time in months, I breathed without chains. Her composure faltered just for a heartbeat before she straightened again, her voice sharp. Do you even hear yourself, Nathaniel? You're throwing away everything, our influence, our standing, this entire house, because of some sentimental attachment to a servant. She's not a servant, I snapped, my voice rising. She's the reason this house still means anything. She raised me when my parents wouldn't. She gave me strength when no one else did. And you, I pointed at her, my chest burning. You've done nothing but try to strip this place of its soul. Her eyes narrowed. So that's what this is about. You're a little boy clinging to bedtime stories and scraped knees, pretending it makes you noble. No, I said, my voice low, deadly calm. It makes me human. The door creaked and Caroline's voice drifted in from the hallway. Finally. I turned to see her leaning against the door frame, arms crossed, a grim smile tugging at her lips. Took you long enough, little brother. I thought you'd let her burn the whole place down before you grew a spine. Vanessa's head whipped toward Caroline, fury sparking in her eyes. Stay out of this. Caroline chuckled. Oh, trust me, I plan to. Watching you pack your bags is entertainment enough. Vanessa glared at her, then back at me, her voice icy. You'll regret this, Nathaniel, mark my words. I shook my head. No, the only regret I have is every night I stayed silent while you humiliated the woman who gave me everything. That ends tonight. Vanessa's chest rose and fell, her composure cracking under the weight of my words. For the first time I saw fear flicker behind her eyes, not of me but of losing control. She grabbed the remaining earring from the vanity, her movements sharp, almost violent. You'll beg me to come back, she hissed. I stepped aside, pointing toward the door. Go. The room felt like it was holding its breath as she shoved past Caroline and disappeared down the hall, her heels striking the floor like a warning shot. Caroline lingered a moment, studying me with something softer than her usual sarcasm. You did the right thing, she said quietly. I exhaled, the weight lifting from my chest. I should have done it sooner. She nodded, then tilted her head. So what now? You've burned one bridge, time to rebuild the one that actually matters. I swallowed hard, my thoughts already with Ruth, if she'll let me. Caroline smirked faintly. She will. She always saw more in you than the rest of us did. Don't waste it this time. She turned, leaving me alone in the room that suddenly felt bigger, emptier. I walked to the window, pulling it open. The night air rushed in, cool and sharp, filling my lungs. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. But beneath that freedom was the undeniable truth. Ruth was gone. And if I didn't act soon, I might lose her forever. I didn't take the car. The road out of Fairmont Hills deserved more than glass and steel between me and the truth. So I walked, step by step, down the long gravel path, past the gates that had once made me feel like a prisoner, past the towering oaks that had been silent witnesses to my boyhood. Every step felt like confession. I could still see it, Ruth's hand holding mine when I was small, guiding me along this same road after a fall or a fight with Caroline. Back then, she never needed to scold me. Her silence said enough, her patience teaching me that walking forward was its own kind of strength. Now, decades later, I walked the same road alone. But this time, the silence was mine to break. By the time I reached the edge of town, the sun had slipped low, streaking the sky with bruised purples and gold. Her cottage stood there, modest and tucked behind an overgrown garden, the kind of place most would overlook, but I couldn't miss it. It had Ruth written all over it, humble, steady, welcoming without trying. I knocked once. The door opened and there she was. Her gaze was wary, her posture straight, as though she'd been expecting this but wasn't sure she wanted it. She didn't step aside right away. She just looked at me, searching my face for something only she knew how to read. "Ruth," I said, my voice low. "Nathaniel." She finally opened the door wider, gesturing me in. The inside of the cottage nearly unraveled me. The scent of lavender lingered in the air, just as it always had in her quarters at Fairmont Hills. A teapot sat steaming gently on the table, 2 cups already placed out of habit, as though she still expected company. On the wall, framed photographs hung in quiet tribute, snapshots of a life that revolved around everyone but herself. One of them caught my eye, me as a boy, perched on the front steps of the estate, Ruth beside me, her arm steady around my shoulders. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. She sat across from me at the small wooden table, her hands folded, waiting. I should have spoken sooner, I began, my throat dry. At the gala, at the brunch table, every time she mocked you, I should have said something. My silence, my voice cracked. My silence hurt more than her cruelty. I let you down. Ruth studied me quietly, her eyes unblinking, her expression unreadable. I leaned forward, desperate for her to believe me. I thought I was protecting peace, but peace isn't built on silence. It's built on truth, and I failed you. The words hung heavy in the air. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, but there was weight in it. Do you know why it hurt, Nathaniel? Because I betrayed you, I whispered. Her gaze softened, but only slightly. Because I expected more. I raised you to believe that kindness was strength. That silence in the face of cruelty wasn't noble, it was surrender. And when I looked at you at that table, I saw surrender. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back. I was weak. No, she said, shaking her head gently. You were afraid. Weakness is a choice you make forever. Fear is something you fight every day. The question is, do you plan to keep fighting, or will you run back to your silence? I let the words settle, each one a challenge I couldn't escape. I'm done running, I said finally. I don't expect forgiveness tonight. I don't even expect you to come back. But I need you to know I won't let it end with words. I'll live it every day. Her eyes searched mine long enough for me to feel the full weight of her judgment. Then she sighed, setting her teacup down with slow precision. Then don't let it end with words, she said softly. Live it. The air between us stilled, not heavy this time, but fragile. A truce waiting to be built, a chance not yet lost. She rose from the table, walking to the window where the fading light painted her in gold. For a long moment she said nothing, only watching the shadows stretch across the garden. I stayed in my chair, hands clenched, heart hammering, because this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The day Ruth returned to Fairmont Hills, the house exhaled. Not loudly, not with cheers or celebration, just a subtle shift, as though the walls themselves had been waiting for her steps to echo again. The staff greeted her with quiet relief, their smiles unspoken proof that the house hadn't felt right without her. But between Ruth and me, the air was different, fragile, cautious. She didn't rush back into our rhythm. She moved through the estate with her usual composure, but her gaze carried a distance, as though she were measuring whether this place could still be hers, or if she had simply returned to close a chapter. I decided then that I wouldn't try to win her back with words. Words were easy. Words had failed her before, so I turned to action. The next morning I joined her in the kitchen before dawn. She raised an eyebrow as I rolled up my sleeves and reached for the stack of silverware waiting to be polished. You don't belong here, she said softly. I do now, I replied, setting a fork on the cloth. I need to learn what it means to keep this house alive. Not as a master, Ruth, as your son, because that's what I've always been, even if I forgot it. For a moment, I thought she might tell me to leave. Instead, she handed me another fork. Then don't complain when your hands blister, she said, the faintest curve tugging at her lips. Day after day, I worked beside her. I carried trays, swept halls, learned the rituals she had kept for decades, the ones Vanessa had mocked as outdated. I wasn't graceful at it. I spilled water once, earning a chuckle from the staff. I tore my jacket on a loose nail while hauling firewood. My hands, once calloused only by deals and handshakes, reddened from labor, but I didn't stop. At first, Ruth watched in silence, her expression unreadable, but slowly I noticed the change. The stiffness in her shoulders eased. Her eyes, when they caught mine, softened, not because I promised her loyalty, but because I was living it. Of course, the estate didn't stay quiet. Caroline was the first to speak openly. One evening, she cornered me in the study, arms crossed, her tone sharp. "So this is who you are now, Nathaniel Reed, heir of Fairmont, reduced to polishing spoons at dawn." I met her gaze without flinching. Not reduced, restored. Caroline's brow furrowed. For once she had no quick retort. After a beat she muttered, "If Ruth has her place, maybe we all still do." And she left without another word. But Ethan was different. He thrived on cracks in the family, and Ruth's return was a chance he wouldn't waste. Over whiskey one night he leaned across the table, his grin sly. "You think scrubbing floors makes you noble. It makes you weak." Vanessa understood that. She saw opportunity. He laughed, shaking his head. "You're throwing it all away for a woman who doesn't even share your blood." "She gave me more than blood," I said coldly. "She gave me a spine." Ethan's grin faltered for just a moment before he leaned back, sipping his drink. "Keep telling yourself that, cousin. Just don't be surprised when this house eats you alive." But for once, I wasn't shaken. Because every time I thought of Ruth's weary eyes, every time I remembered her walking away with that suitcase, I knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about proving myself to her. It was about proving that Fairmont Hills could be more than pride and cruelty. One evening, after the last of the dishes were cleared, Ruth lingered at the kitchen table. I set down the final stack of plates, my arms aching from the day's work. "You don't have to keep this up forever," she said quietly. I shook my head. "I don't want to stop, not until you believe me, not until you believe this house still belongs to you too." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching. Then she let out a small sigh, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "Your father would never have done this," she said. "I'm not my father," I replied. Her gaze softened then, just slightly, but enough to feel like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time since she had returned, I saw something flicker in her expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but hope, and it was enough. Months passed, and slowly Fairmont Hills began to breathe again. Without Vanessa's sharp presence cutting through every hallway, the estate felt different, lighter. Not perfect. Caroline and Ethan still bickered across dinner tables, their sparring more ritual than malice. But beneath the old rivalries there was something new. Balance. The staff, once cautious and quiet, moved through the halls with ease again. Laughter returned to the kitchen. Music drifted from the ballroom some evenings, when Caroline convinced the younger staff to play records while polishing silver. Even Ethan, ever the opportunist, seemed less dangerous, his schemes blunted by the fact that no one was feeding them anymore. The estate, scarred though it was, had rediscovered its pulse. One morning I found Ruth on the porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. The air was cool, the kind that smelled of dew and earth, carrying the promise of spring. She sat in the rocker that had once belonged to my grandmother, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the horizon. I sat beside her, lowering myself into the chair with a sigh that came more from the weight of memory than age. "You finally learned," she said without looking at me. I turned, searching her profile. "Learned what?" She sipped her tea before answering. "That respect isn't inherited, it's lived." Her words landed with the finality of truth. I nodded slowly, my gaze following the rising sun as it spilled light across the fields. "This estate isn't a monument to wealth anymore," I said quietly. "It's a home for those who are family by blood or by choice." She studied me then, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "You almost lost it, Nathaniel. Not just me, not just this house. You almost lost yourself. I know. My voice cracked and I didn't try to hide it. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never forget what silence costs. Ruth reached over, her hand steady, and laid it over mine. That simple gesture, more than any words, told me I had finally done enough. Not to erase the past, but to build something new from it. Later that week, we gathered the family on the front lawn. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and wood smoke. Caroline stood with her arms crossed, impatient as always, while Ethan leaned against the fountain, his smirk only half serious. The staff lingered nearby, curious. I spoke plainly. Fairmont Hills isn't going to be a place of silence anymore. Not for those who work here, not for those who live here. This house doesn't belong to vanity or cruelty. It belongs to those willing to honor it together. Caroline raised an eyebrow but nodded slowly. About time you said it out loud. Ethan rolled his eyes. You sound like a preacher. Maybe, I admitted, but some truths are worth preaching. That night, as the lamps flickered in the windows and the estate glowed against the dark, I walked the halls and felt something I hadn't in years, belonging, not because of the Reed name or the land or the wealth, but because we had finally chosen what mattered. The story of Fairmont Hills would not be remembered for its grandeur or its wealth. It would be remembered for something greater, a son reclaiming his voice, a woman reclaiming her dignity, and a house reclaiming its soul. Looking back, I've come to realize a painful truth. Silence is never harmless. It's like an invisible blade cutting deeper than any words ever could. And in the moment I chose silence, I allowed cruelty to flourish, betraying Ruth and betraying myself. Life always pushes us to a crossroads, to choose safety or to choose courage. But here's the truth. Peace built on silence is nothing more than a storm waiting to explode. Because respect, it doesn't come from power, it isn't bought with money, and it isn't handed down by title. It's proven day by day in the choices we make and the people we choose to stand for. If there's one lesson I want you to take with you, it's this. True worth isn't measured by wealth. It's measured by how we make others feel safe, valued, and truly seen. So ask yourself, in your life, is there someone silently waiting for you to speak up for them? And when that moment comes, will you bow your head in silence, or will you become the voice they desperately need? If this story touched your heart, leave a comment. If you see it differently, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's coming next.